Hello, everyone. You listen to another episode of The Fight Game with Timothy McCain. And today, I have the pleasure of interviewing the miraculous Mose Smith. How you doing today, sir?
Doing wonderful, wonderful.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So when did your love for the fight game begin?
My love for the fight game actually started when I was a kid. Um, my dad was always a sports fanatic. Um, his favorite sport being football, and I'd probably say second and third being a mixture between boxing and basketball.
Mm,
Um, and so if he watched the fight, I'd watch it with him. But then, when I moved from Michigan to North Carolina with my mom, I never forget a friend of my mom's took me with him when he was going to watch a Tyson fight. He was going to watch it, going to his friends. They were going to have watch the Tyson fight on a big screen, and we watched the whole undercard. And then here came the Tyson fight, and I was so glad that I didn't move because Mike Tyson ended that fight in 26 seconds. you know, um, and at that point in time, I was in Taekwondo, and I was just like, man, Mike Tyson is amazing.
mm,
And then I started studying boxing, and I was like, as far as looking up different boxers and checking them out, what they had done, reading books on them, and I was like, this is these guys are absolutely amazing. I'd watched things on Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, Floyd Mayweather. Especially being from Michigan, especially Floyd. Um, you know, and then I'd go, okay. But at that time, I never thought that I would be a professional boxer. I was more like, okay, this is cool. And throughout school, I actually thought that, I'm going to be in school and I'm going to play football. I'm going to go to college, play football, and I'm going to go try to go into the NFL. That's what I thought I was going to do.
wow.
Um, I loved boxing, but I'm like, I'm great at football. I'm going into the NFL. And as you see, that didn't happen, but I became a professional boxer, so I'm okay with that. I'd much rather be doing this anyway.
Wow. I got you. I got you. So what led you at the time to choose football over boxing? And what position did you play? And just explain your love for football.
With my love for football, um, it was one of those things where the height that I am now, I was this height at 12 years old.
Wow.
Um, I was pretty much 6 feet at 12 years old, and at 12 years old, I was like 6 feet and 205. Um,
Heavyweight.
yeah, I've been a heavyweight since I was 12. Um, when I wrestled in school, I dropped down to 180 and 89 because my first coach asked me to, and because he had a guy that had been wrestling before me. He'd been there a year longer than I had, and he said, "Well, he's heavyweight, and he's a lot over heavyweight. He's like, it'd be easier for you to cut weight and get down to 189. Um, is that okay with you?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's cool." And I went ahead and I did, and I trained to get down to 189 pounds, and I wrestled for my first year at 189. Then my second year, I wrestled at heavyweight, and I was like, "It's no problem either way." Um, but why I didn't go into boxing at that point was because although I had a love for it, I loved to watch it, um, and I wanted to be a part of it. It was the lack of opportunity at that time.
Mhm.
I was in Concord, North Carolina. Um, didn't at the time know a whole lot about Charlotte because of course, I was a kid. But at the same time, I was, um, you know, I did Concord at that time didn't have any boxing academies or anything like that.
Mm.
So, um, you know, so I'd say it was a lack of opportunity of why I didn't start boxing.
Interesting.
Um, but whereas I didn't start boxing, like I say, I did. going to wrestling for both school and AAU. I was in wrestling. I was a multiple time gold medalist. And as a matter of fact, out of school and AAU, out of all the tournaments I ever entered, I only didn't win first place one time, and in that one, I won a bronze medal.
Wow.
So, um, um, so it's being in combat sports in one shape, form, or another has pretty much been for the last 27 years.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, as a wrestler, like you said, you were winning gold medals. Why why not just go for wrestling or go for mixed martial arts right off the bat? Because you had so much success in the beginning
Um, well,
professionally.
I went around, and it's something because we'll get into a little bit more, but I actually kind of stumbled into boxing by accident
Uh-huh.
as a professional. But when I was when I was going around to because a lot of guys like to come off of a certain team in MMA when you turn pro, and I was going around to the teams around here and talking to them. And you got to excuse me, that's my 22-month-old.
No
Um,
worries.
and that's and as I went around to different MMA teams, like I went to one team that I found out about that was in Gastonia, North Carolina, and they told me, they were like, why don't you face our heavyweight, and if you can beat him, then we'll sign you and we'll push you, and we'll train, we'll push you, and we'll help you. Um, and with them, I fought him, and I told him, I said, well, what we'll do, why don't we do a best out of five?
Interesting.
And they said, well, we'll do first to five. And and they said, whichever one of you does first to and gets 5 wins, whether it's by submission, knockdown, and they were saying, if you get knocked down, that's a win. And I'm like, okay, cool, and that doesn't include takedowns, but like if you knock down somebody with a jab or a hook or something like that, and it's a punch, then that counts as what would be a knockout. Okay,
Mhm.
no problem. Um, I made him tap 3 times and dropped him twice.
Shoot.
He didn't beat me not once. Um, but then we were talking on the phone over time, and they were like, he's been with us for 10 years, and all that, the politics came into it.
Wow.
And those things kept on happening. So um, around that time, I had a kid that was getting ready to be born. So of course, I was doing construction work and working. And I was like, well, maybe it's not meant for me to fight MMA at this point. I'm just going to work. I'm gonna work, and I'm gonna take care of my kid and do what I'm supposed to do as a man. Um, and
Respect.
I was like, okay, I'm gonna do what I got to do. Yeah, it's my dream, like it's a lot of guys' dream to be a professional athlete, but my kid comes first. Um, and I was like, okay, so um, long story short, the way I stumbled into boxing, um, I met who is now my wife, and um, she had twins before she met me, and I'm not the only dad they've ever known. Those are my twins. Those are my kids. I love them. You know, beyond no, there's no deeper love.
That's
They're mine.
amazing.
Um,
That's amazing.
and shortly after we met, I think they had turned like 8 or something like that, and um, I was walking in downtown Concord, and I saw Singleton's Boxing Academy, and I was looking for something for them to get into, recreational wise and sports wise. And I walked in just to get some information on what they did with kids, because I saw Academy and I was like, oh, it's a school, it's for kids. Um, and so I was like, all right. And I walked in, and before I got all the information, saw the facilities they had. And when I was on my way out, he said, "Let me walk you out." I was like, "Okay." He's like, "Man, I got a heavyweight coming in to spar tonight, and I don't have a heavyweight. Do you want to come in and spar with him?" And I'm like, "Sure." He's like, "Have you ever sparred before?" I started laughing. I'm like, "Yeah, I have." He's like, "All right." He's like, "Why don't you come on by tonight?" So I went by and I sparred, and I was like, "Okay." I wasn't, because he came from another gym, and everybody else that came from the gym sparred first, and he kind of had us sparring last as the main event sparring. They had family members coming in. I was like, "Oh, this is a little different." Um, and he literally threw a jab. I went under it. I caught him with a double uppercut and dropped him. It was over. And Benji, the guy that ran the gym, he had to leave before we could spar, but his wife was videotaping it.
Mm.
Um, and he called me the next morning at 6:45. He's like, "Man, I want to train you and manage you." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "I want to train and manage you," and I hung up on him
Why?
because I thought it was a joke. you know, uh, and he called me back. He's like, "Man, I'm not joking. I want to train and manage you to box." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "You mean like professionally?" He's like, "Yeah, professionally." And I told him, I'm like, "Well, I've never boxed before." I'm like, "But we can talk about it." And he's like, "That guy was 4-0 with 4 knockouts." He's like, "And you treated him just like he'd never boxed before. I'm serious. I want to train and manage you." And I said, "All right." I said, "Well, I'll come down to the gym." And I told him, I said, I'll bring my wife with me. She's a paralegal. If there's any paperwork to look over, she'll look over it, and we'll get started. And I went down to the gym. We saw the paperwork. We talked. And he said, "Man, I want you to come up here every day and train with me."
Mm.
He's like, we're gonna get you going. We're gonna get you a debut and get you rolling." I said, "Okay, cool. What do I need to do?" He said, "You need to get to Raleigh sometime and go up to Raleigh and get your boxing license." We packed up the car. Literally the next morning, we left out at like 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. Left from Concord, went up to Raleigh, and got my boxing license. And he called me and was like, "Hey man, the gym's open. Are you coming to the gym?" I'm like, "Not today, man." He's like, "Wow, what's going on?" I said, "Well, I'm up here getting I just got my boxing license. I got it in my hand." And he's like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I've already got it." I'm like, "I just left the office." I'm like, "I'm on my way back to Concord now, but we won't get back for another couple of hours." I'm like, "I'll see you at the gym tomorrow morning." He's like, "Okay." And I showed him the next morning. He thought I was joking. And I told him, I said, "Yeah." He's like, "You got your license? Let me see it." And I showed it to him. He's like, "Oh, you're serious? Let's go." Um, and like I say, regrettably, I ended up finding out that he signed me to a legal management contract. I had called the boxing commission in North Carolina. And I was like, "Hey, I had this going on. This go on. I need to know what's going on with my contract with my manager." They were like, "Who's your manager?" I'm like, "Benji Singleton." And they're like, "Bad news, Benji Singleton boxed professionally for 14 years. I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, he's not a licensed manager in North Carolina." And I said, "So what does that mean?" They're like, "Your contract's not valid. It's not anything that's going to. It doesn't hold any weight. You're pretty much not under contract." Um, so he had introduced me to David Moore, the promoter of One Hit Promotions at the time. Um, and I negotiated with David myself, and pretty much started with the knowledge I had of being in combat sports and the little bit of boxing knowledge Benji had given me. I started training myself and negotiated with David to start to have my debut, and I've been boxing ever since.
Yes, sir. That's amazing. That's amazing. What did that experience teach you about business and also trusting people in the sports world?
Well, kind of the way I've always been is if I meet somebody, I give them the benefit of a doubt. I give them, and I try to do that with people because I want people to do the same with me. But at the same time, I also do my research. If somebody says they're a licensed manager, now I know how to go about researching that. I know how to go about researching if somebody's a licensed promoter, or if they're pulling my chain, or you know, and then I come back and I say, hey, you say you're a licensed manager, you say you're a licensed promoter, um, but you had a license, like some people have said that, oh, I'm a licensed manager, but managers are supposed to pay for their license every year. And if they're
Mm,
and if they don't have their if they haven't paid for their, and because their license literally expires on December 31st, and they January 1st, they need, right after January 1st, they need to be having it paid for. um and I go, hey, your license isn't paid for this year. As soon as they start talking to me, I look it up, I'm like, your license isn't paid for this year. So technically right now you're not a licensed manager. When are you getting that license paid for? And I need to see proof of that.
wow.
It's giving them the benefit of doubt to even be able to listen to what they say, but then being wise enough to go back and do the research on my own, to cover my own tail. And I have to say, and I gotta give a shout out right quick to my manager, because at the end of last year I signed with Psalms 82.6 Management. My manager is Cameron Harvey. Um, and we've been doing good together, man. It's he's done good for me thus far. I feel like we've got a good contract, good understanding. We actually talk a couple times a week, and you know he's he does everything that I need him to. So he's definitely doing his job. Um, I'll be fighting February 13th. He got that fight negotiated for me. He's in the process of already negotiating other fights for me for
Yeah,
later on this year.
amazing.
So, I have to say that I'm pretty happy, because there's some guys that, it seems like even if I know some guys that have 4 wins and 1 loss and they can't get a fight,
Yeah,
you know, but here I am and I've got multiple fights on the table. So,
amazing.
I can't complain as far as the job that he's doing now.
That's amazing. I love that. I love that. So, where do you train and spar at? So, like, I know a lot of fighters, what they'll do is they'll go to different boxing gyms to get work. Where do you go to work?
I have gone to a lot of different places. I've slowed down a lot due to the pandemic. Um, the promoter I'm fighting with on February 13th, I was surprised, gladly surprised, but also glad. All the fighters that'll be showing up to that fight will be taking COVID tests 2 hours before weigh-in. And I'm like, yes, keep us safe. you know. Um,
Absolutely.
so sparring has definitely slowed down during the pandemic, but previously, I've gotten some work in at Charlotte Boxing Academy before. I've gotten work at Contenders Boxing. I've worked with some guys at Dime Boxing in Charlotte. Um, and and I tell people, yeah, sparring is very necessary. Being in the gym is very necessary. um I'm sure, like a lot of fighters, man, my gym is right here. I get on the reflex bag right here at home. I lift weights right here at home. I do my calisthenics at home. I still go out and do my road work. I still go get it and train. And that's one thing I love about boxing, um, is that a lot of the training I can do on my own.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, I need somebody to hold my pads. I need a sparring partner. I need somebody to tell me, hey, you on your footwork, you got to tighten this up. You're slipping here. You need to tighten this up better. You need to speed up a little bit. And we still have that, but also in order to get that, I do just like we're doing now. I do Zoom calls. I do FaceTime calls. And when I've got an opponent, I've got guys that I'll send video to, or I'll just have a conversation with them about the person if they've seen them fight, or I'll send them a video and say, hey, check this out, tell me what you think. Let's help me come up with a game plan here. And in my career, I've gone through a number of different things. When I fought my second fight against DeMonte Cherry, 2 days later, I was in a car wreck on 277 in Charlotte, completely totaled a brand new 2016 Mitsubishi Outlander. And that was 2 days after my second fight. I actually bruised almost every bone from the neck down. It took me about 1.5 years to recover from that and to be able to start training again. But in my third fight, I had my own team that was from we fought at the Grady Cole Center in Charlotte, and I feel like I should have won that fight. I lost to Willie Harvey, but I wasn't in the right mind frame. From the time that I walked out to the ring, and as Mike Tyson has said, Muhammad Ali has said, your mind frame and your mind state is major in boxing.
Absolutely.
But I wasn't in the right mind frame because where my corner and cut man were supposed to be there, even though we were in Charlotte, where they lived, they didn't even show up to the arena. And the team that I actually used was a guy from Denver, Colorado. His team was there, and they were like, "Man, don't even worry about it. We'll come work your corner." And because of course, being in the locker room, I was hot, and they were, everybody kept asking me what's going on. I'm like, I'm gonna give them a little bit more time to get here. And they called my name, and they were like, and the team from Denver was like, "What's going on, man? Where's your team? We haven't seen you be able to prepare or anything." And I'm like, they didn't show up. And they said, "Don't even worry about it. Let's get these gloves on you, and let's get out there. We'll work your corner, man."
That's love.
And it was, man, it was love for real. And I'll never forget them for that. But not only that, but they gave me a decision to make when we got back to the locker room. They're like, "Man, we don't ever want this to happen to you again, and we see the potential that you have. We want you to move to Denver and start training with us." They didn't have the funds to help me move there, and at the time, I didn't have the money to do there. But it was a major consideration. It was major love. I appreciate it. But I was like, "Yo, if I had the money to go, I probably would have went."
Wow.
At that time in my career, I didn't have the money to go. But I was like, "Hey, I appreciate it. If I ever get out to Denver, at least I can come out and train with y'all. I know I've got somewhere to train." They're like, "Yeah, and if you ever have a fight, just give us a call. If you don't got people to work your corner, you need a fight camp, call us. We can even just do fight camp, and you can come up here, do a fight camp, and we'll come to your fight. We'll get it worked out." I was like, "All right." But what I did for my fourth fight when I fought Dustin Long, I trained harder than I had trained for any other fight to fight Dustin Long, because I found out that he had been on The Contender, I believe, season 9. And he had won a title in MMA, and he was the tallest person I'd ever fought. He was 6'5.5". And I was like, "Yo," I'm like, "I got to train hard for this guy," and I trained harder than I ever had. But I also did something that I hadn't done before. I've got a friend of mine, Wahid, and shout out to him. He boxed amateur a little bit when he lived in New York. And I talked to him, and I was like, "Yo, look, it's time for me to do like some fighters do and build my own team. I've got to build my own, go with my own, and stop depending on people that are already in this sport to not put another fighter over me, or to show up, or not to stop depending on them to be who I need them to be, and just accept them for whoever they are, and I got to go forward regardless." And we went up to Ringo, Georgia, and In that fight, I threw so many punches that I punched myself out. In less than a minute and a half, I threw over 120 punches. I got him in the corner 3 times. I controlled the fight until I gassed out, and then with body blows, he was able to get a TKO because I didn't have any more gas. That was a learning lesson that if I would have had some amateur experience, I wouldn't have lost that one either. But no excuses. He won fair and square, and he's already said that
Run it back.
we'll run it back. It's a mutual respect and friendship. But he's in the cruiserweight division right now. So after I achieve some goals that I have in the heavyweight division, I'm dropping the cruiser, and we'll run it back when I get there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And shout out to him because most recently in his last fight was on the Deontay Wilder Ortiz 2 undercard where he knocked out Marcellus Wilder on TV. So big up to Dustin Long for that win.
That's huge.
Yeah. So I look forward to seeing him return to the ring as well. I of course I hope that he continues to do better. That way, he's higher ranked when we run it back.
Absolutely, and then you can take that W, right?
Right.
Exactly. So what have you learned throughout your first 4 professional fights that you will use in the future? Like you said in your last fight, you threw over 100 punches in a very short span. What are some of the lessons that you learned in those 4 fights that you're going to use in the future, like on February 13th, for example?
Well, one, I learned to pace myself. Where I understood before, pace yourself for, much longer than you would for a street fight. But I was like, man, I feel like I've got the stamina to go 12 rounds. And, I feel like I've trained that hard. Well, now I really have trained hard enough to go 12 rounds. That's light work. But it's knowing how to keep the pace and knowing how to pace myself so that I don't gas out in one round. It's okay to throw that many punches in one round, but pace them out. And also, I've learned how to, from my first fight to that 4th fight, like I say, I pretty much controlled the pace of that fight until I gassed out.
Right.
That was, that showed a major advance in my learning from my first 3 fights, where actually the second fight, I controlled the pace of that one as well. But, I'm not allowing my opponents to ever control the pace of the fight anymore. Whether it's me coming out aggressive, whether it's me coming out looking to counterpunch. When I study video on my opponents now, I now study to see how everything from how they start the fight off to how they finish it. To the punch combinations that they throw most often. And it's like, okay, and that's one thing that helped me with Dustin Long is I looked at how he started off, even in his MMA fights. I looked how he started off because a lot of people don't understand that even if you're looking at MMA video, if it's somebody that fought MMA and now they're boxing, they're still gonna start off similar because if somebody is a slow starter in MMA and you see 1 or 2 fights and they're a slow starter in boxing, then they're just a slow starter. That's them. That's a part of their fight personality. If they come out aggressive, okay, then I know to gauge whether I'm taller than they are, whether I'm shorter than they are, whether I need to shrink myself down, and what I need to do to create a game plan to beat that opponent. And I've learned that I'm not really fighting that person. I'm fighting myself. I am my own toughest opponent. There's nobody out there that can beat me in that ring worse than I beat myself when I'm doing road work, when I'm, when I'm training, and even when I get up the next 2 days and I'm sore as I want to be, and I get up and I go do it some more. There's no fighter out there that can beat me worse than I beat my own body to prepare for this fight. So they can throw what they want at me. They're not gonna win.
I love it. I love it. What is success to the miraculous Mose Smith inside the ring and outside the ring? What is success specifically for you? What does it mean to you?
Inside the ring, say that last part again.
Oh, I was just saying specifically, what does success mean to Mose Smith? Can you hear me?
Okay. Inside the ring. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear
Yes,
me?
sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Success to me is inside the ring. I've got a few titles that I'm going after in the heavyweight division. Just regional and national titles. That I want to go after before I drop down to the cruiserweight division, and then I'll go after the same titles in the cruiserweight division before I go after cruiserweight world titles.
I love it.
The ultimate goal is cruiserweight world titles, but it's going to be steps of success along the way. Um, and I tell people, just because there's certain guys that I call out or certain guys that I want to fight doesn't mean I don't respect them. Um, for example, a guy that I really like, guy that I really respect, um, Rydell Mays. He just won the USBF world title, or one of the USBF titles. If I get an opportunity to fight him for that title, I'm going for it. Big up to him and everything that he's done. Um, it was awesome to see that he did a Christmas toy drive in his city, um, and that he's been doing it annually. Big up to him on that. He's doing major things on the charity front. He's doing big things in the ring. Within his last two fights, he just won his title. But as we all know, when you win a title, there's a target on your back.
Exactly.
You know, so I'm shooting for that, and I feel like I'm supposed to. Um, my very next fight is against Dylan Corson. Um, so success first in that next fight is either demolishing him every single round or knocking him out. Period. Doesn't matter what round I knock him out in, knocking him out or demolishing him every round. But then, like I say, after I win a couple titles in the heavyweight division, dropping to the cruiserweight division, going after the same titles and world titles in the cruiserweight division, because especially by the time I get to that level in the cruiserweight division, I already don't feel like there's anybody in the cruiserweight division that can take my power. But I will have honed my skill by the time I get there enough that mixing the skill that I have, the power I have, agility, speed, and everything else that a boxer needs, they're not going to be ready for what's coming when they meet Miraculous M4 in the middle of the ring. Um, the cruiserweight division, when I get there, is going to get demolished. Um, that is success to me in the ring, is taking these short steps to success and then letting people look back at the track record of success once I've got world titles around my waist. And then, of course, like everybody once they win a world title, it's the goal is to unify. um Success in life to me is leaving a legacy that my kids can be proud of, that my grandchildren will be proud of. um it's not, a lot of people say, oh, it's about finances. I mean, yeah, it's about finances. I want to be able to take care of my family and leave something for my kids and my grandkids. But if I leave a legacy of, being somebody that did what they said, They're respected people and commanded respect in life. And I teach my children the right way to go and the right way to be as a person. That to me is success. You know, helping my kids be successful. That's success.
Where can people find you on social media? And when is it your fight pay-per-view?
I believe it's going to be streamed. Um, I'm not sure where it's going to be streamed on. I have posted the poster for the fight on Twitter, and it's at miraculous underscore M4. And had my social media team posted on Instagram, and that's at miraculous M4. Um, and you can even find it on LinkedIn, Mose Miraculous M4 Smith. So you can find me there as well. Um,
Yes, sir.
and you can also find me on YouTube, Miraculous Sports and Lifestyle. That is my channel, and you can also catch my podcast, Miraculous Sports and Lifestyle, as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, Mose, thank you very much for your time. You have an incredible day.
You too.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And everybody, make sure you watch, stream February 13th. See this man fight, the miraculous Moses Smith. Thank
All
you,
right.
sir.
Thank you.
All right, brother.
All right.